Hey everyone, JC FFL Consultants. JB and I have been traveling coast to coast. We decided to take a break and stop into Omaha, Nebraska to visit our friends at KutakRock. I'd like to introduce you to a good friend of mine, Joe Kavan. Joe, why don't you tell us a little bit about KutakRock and what you all have to offer?
John, great having you here.
Thanks so much.
It's always good to see you. KutakRock is a national law firm with offices in about 20 cities throughout the United States. We have well over 500 lawyers, do a variety of work for all kinds of industry. Most importantly is that we're the only national law firm that has a practice group absolutely dedicated to the firearms industry. We do everything for manufacturers, dealers, ammunition dealers, importers, exporters, across the board. We do it for absolutely everything, and we do pretty much everything in the firearms industry for people in the industry.
Well, that's great, and we appreciate it. I know we work together quite a bit.
Absolutely.
So this week, we're going to spend some time on a series of videos to help you, the FFL community. We really appreciate you having us out. We look forward to delivering you with some real information that helps you in your everyday business. So stay tuned for more. So hey, Joe, let's talk some more about that risk mitigation and some of the programs that the National Shooting Sports Foundation offers with their premium retail members, those mock audits, the straw purchase prevention training, some of those things, even suicide prevention now, right?
Right. Those are important programs. I mean, all of those programs will help a person in the industry that gets involved in any type of this litigation. As you may not know, the PLCAA probably in about 2003 and 2004, at its inception, was the primary drafter of that was Larry Keane at the Shooting Sports Foundation, their general counsel. So the Shooting Sports Foundation has had a long history of being involved with the Protection of Lawful Commerce and Arms Act. I mean, they represent the industry, and this was a great piece that they delivered to the industry.
That's awesome. So the PLCAA, does it mean that you're not going to get sued?
No. In fact, the PLCAA is irrelevant until you are sued. This is basically a defense. So what commonly happens in any of these situations, because it is a horrific situation for everybody involved, is that they will try and get everybody who has ever been involved with this firearm involved in a lawsuit. And bear in mind, just because the dealer got the proceed from NICS, it's not the end of the story. I mean, that firearm is going to have a life of its own for a very long time. You don't know where that's going to end up, and you don't know who's going to end up with it. And so it will continue on and have a life of its own. So this is really very important. It's because these lawsuits can involve a great deal of money. It also can involve a great deal of defense costs, and so it's very important to understand how this works and understand how you can fit into one of those exceptions under the PLCAA, or not get into one of the exceptions under the PLCAA, so you have that protection of that act.
Right, and the old adage that we hear from a lot of FFLs, and I'm sure you've heard it too, is, hey, NICS or the point of contact state said I could transfer the firearm, so I did. Is that a good defense?
It's better than not having that. If you had a denial and transferred it, then you even have more problems. Right. But no, I mean, it's nice to have. Everyone should have it when you have the transfer of a firearms, but that's usually not a relevant fact. If it is a relevant fact, you have more problems than you perhaps want to have in a litigation situation.
So Joe, you mentioned the elements, the exceptions, the components of this, right? So let's run through each one of those individually and kind of talk through some of that.
Well, there's 6 exceptions to your protection under the PLCAA. Frankly, there's only 2 that are very relevant. For example, the other 4 would be things like lawsuits by the Attorney General of a state or product liability lawsuits. Those don't fall within the purview or the protections of the PLCAA. The 2 most relevant ones are Exceptions 2 and Exception 3. Exception 2 has to do with negligent entrustment or negligence per se. Negligent entrustment is it should be obvious when that situation exists. There's been cases where firearms dealers have been warned not to sell a firearm to someone because they have mental issues or because they're likely to use it in a crime. In those cases, under many states, and this has to go back to the state definition of negligent entrustment, in those situations they're pretty egregious, and that is an exception to the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act. The third exception under the PLCAA is what's known as the predicate exception, because there's predicate statutes upon which it's based. For example, in the Soto case, they use this as one of the pleadings. And by the way, when a lawsuit happens, you will see 3 or 4 or 5 of these exceptions pled in every one of their lawsuits. They try and hit as many of these as they possibly can. But for example, in the Soto case, they were going under the third predicate exception from the standpoint of the marketing and advertising actions of the defendants were a violation of a state law dealing with the marketing or advertisement of a firearm. This was kind of a new way to approach this, and at this point, the Connecticut Supreme Court is agreeing with them. But in that case, that's not used as much as the other one of the predicate exception under number 3, and that's violation of this kind of the same thing, a federal law with respect to the sale or marketing of guns. For example, that's where you get into a straw purchase situation. That's where you get into a situation where the gun dealer has signed the 4473, basically made a false statement under the 4473, and hence it's a violation of the Gun Control Act. Mm-hmm. So those are the kind of things that are those exceptions that once you can get past that in a court, then that case doesn't have to be dismissed.
Gotcha. So one of the things that we always tell FFLs is you have the right to refuse the sale of a firearm to anyone for any reason, no matter what.
Right.
So can we go into that a little bit and kind of just help the audience understand what that's all about?
Well, there's always the whole common sense issue with respect to sale of firearms, right? I mean, you don't feel right doing it. Something doesn't feel right. And any time you have that situation is the time that you can just say, I'm not comfortable with this. I'm not going to do it. Mm-hmm. My colleagues here and my partners here and I talk about different scenarios all the time with respect to, what about this? What about this? And would this be a problem? And try and get to really difficult situations where that happens. And at the end of the day, you really need to think about it in these terms. The dealers really have to think about it from the perspective of, look, I'm going to make, let's say it's even $100 off of the sale of a firearm. You will spend way more than that trying to defend a lawsuit. So if in doubt, it's just way easier to say no to the $30, $50, $60 profit. It gets a little more difficult when you're selling a collector gun, right? Mm-hmm. And you're going to make $4,000 or $5,000 off of it. Just means that you have to put that much more care and that much more diligence into what you do with that.
Sure.
So, absolutely. If in doubt, it's just easier to walk away from that sale.
Right. And it's similar with the National Shooting Sports Foundation and the ATF have a joint initiative, Don't Lie for the Other Guy program, which is straw purchase prevention training. And I know JB and I travel around the country. We teach this stuff at SSU. We teach it at educational seminars in conjunction with the ATF, rather. How important is that straw purchase prevention training?
It's huge. We've defended a number of lawsuits for large dealers and for manufacturers. And one of the items that we can show is that these defendants, in this case, the manufacturers, the FFLs, the dealers, have put their employees through the Don't Lie program. They have the Don't Lie signs up. They make it an important part of their business. It's hard. I mean, straw purchases sometimes are kind of obvious, but sometimes not at all.
Right.
We can come up with a number of situations where you go, wow, that could go either way.
Right.
And these the whole Don't Lie materials that's put out, I believe it's free to the members, has been just a great help for FFLs in these situations.
We always tell FFLs when we're on our visits during our mock audits through the National Shooting Sports Foundation, the individual has to show a genuine interest.
No question.
Yeah, and that's really what it comes down to, right?
It is, and we can come up with just a huge list of, what about this? How about this? It's the father son that go in, right? It's the wife husband go in with these kind of purchases, and one party knows much more about it than the other. Well, those aren't straw purchases,
right?
Or the situation where the number one question: are you the actual purchaser of the gun? Where you go? Well, I'm actually buying it for a gift for my son for Christmas or my daughter for Christmas, right?
Right.
And those type situations. But it's those. There's just that feeling. There is that sixth sense that you get from some of these purchases.
Right.
And you just have to do everything you can to make sure you don't end up in that situation.
Right. And I know that we're going to actually do a session with KutakRock on straw purchase prevention and straw sales. So we're going to kind of just leave that one to the side for a little bit, because we want to make sure we have enough information to share with you on that, because it is definitely a separate topic for us. So let's go back to negligence and that exception. Why don't we give some examples of what negligence means?
Well, it's not so much negligence; it's the negligent entrustment. Okay, and that's part of the second exception to the protection under the PLCAA. And the negligent entrustment part of it is, for example, negligent entrustment pretty much across the United States is the situation where you give the keys to your car to someone that you know is intoxicated, right? That's negligent entrustment. And it's similar in the firearms world, right? You've seen situations where, let's say someone's intoxicated and comes into your store at 9:30, 10 o'clock at night to buy ammunition, right? That's negligent entrustment. If someone is obviously doesn't have the mental capacity to be a firearms owner under the definitions. And it goes back to the concept of prohibited persons under the Gun Control Act. If you sense that one of those pieces isn't quite right, you have the absolute right to a no sale, because if you don't, you're going to be in that situation where it is going to be a negligent entrustment situation. And that onus is on you to prevent that sale.
Right. And for those of you that don't know, and I'm sure most of you do, we help you, FFL consultants, we help you with these different scenarios. So really, reaching out to us, reaching out to KutakRock can really help you figure out where you stand with the PLCAA and remaining, risk mitigation and getting in front of what's going on with this. So Joe, again, really appreciate the conversation around the PLCAA. And remember, everyone, we like to build a relationship before you need us. That's important. So make sure that you click below. Both of our websites are down there. Make sure you like us, follow us, and share this with some of your other FFL partners in your community. We really appreciate our relationship here with and speaking with you, Joe. Thanks so much. Be sure to reach out to us when you need us. Remember, that first call is always free. Hey, Joe, listen, hold on a second, folks. Aren't you going to be at SHOT Show?
Absolutely. This is our 10th or 11th or 12th year.
That's great. Hey, what are you going to be talking about?
We will be in the dealer compliance section of the SHOT Show University, talking about dealer liability, 4473 issues, and some tips for pawnbrokers.
That's great. Hey, listen, head out to the National Shooting Sports Foundation website, nssf.org. Make sure you click on SHOT Show and check out the upcoming agenda for January. KutakRock is going to be speaking at a number of different sessions. Be sure to reserve your spot now.